Welcome to Success in Brief. I'm your host, Rosanne Felicello. In every episode, we spotlight successful women in the law. We discuss with them their journey to success. We talk about the difficulties and the trade-offs, along with the highlights and the benefits, and about what success means to each of them. We hope to inspire you with these stories on your own path to success. Good morning. My name is Rosanne Felicello, and this is Success in Brief. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Caroline Krauss to our podcast. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Caroline is a founding partner of Krauss, Shaknes, Tallentire, and Messeri. I hope I said that correctly.
None of them.
Okay, could you please let us know the name?
Sure. So it's Krauss, Shaknes, Tallentire, and Messeri, LLP.
Thank you. And prior to launching her own firm, Caroline spent 24 years at Rome, where she served as a partner and co-chair of the Matrimonial practice group. Caroline graduated from Ithaca College and earned her JD at Brooklyn Law School. So I'm excited to speak to Caroline today and hear more about her success. Let's jump right in. What was your path to becoming an attorney, Caroline?
So, like many young people, I graduated from Ithaca College. I had a degree in communications and then realized that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And so I had a conversation with my mother in my spring semester of my senior year in which I said, I don't think I want to do this. And she said, oh, well, you have one class left to graduate in your major, so you're going to do that. And then if you want to figure out something, you can do that on your own. But you are graduating in the spring. And so I did.
And then when did you apply to law school? Did you apply immediately for that fall, or did you take some time?
No, I took some time. I sort of, in all honesty, floundered around a little bit. And I think the benefit of the floundering is that it makes one focus on, okay, so this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is what I want it to be. How do I get from here to there? And I had always been interested in the law since I'd taken some classes, which were mandatory requirements at Ithaca College, and a class that I thought I was going to hate. It turns out that I loved it, absolutely loved it. And I decided to take a chance on law school. And I approached it with, to say vim and vigor is the understatement of the century, because I knew that this was my opportunity to make my life something better than I was currently in, and I needed a path. And that was provided to me by the good people of Brooklyn Law School.
That's a great story. When I was in undergrad, I actually thought about going into journalism, and I took a class there and hated the class. So I decided it wasn't for me, even though I had thought that's what I wanted to do. So it's interesting that we both sort of had that taste of communications as a background. Did you work in communications at all after college? Or?
I didn't. It was really something that I was completely disenamored with. Let's put it this way. If I had to work really long hours and get really crappy pay, or I could work really long hours and get paid something good, I'll take the second one.
I hear you. I agree. We all have to work hard. You just have to make sure you know you're working hard doing something that you enjoy, and also hopefully that pays you what you're valued, pays your value, or at least something approximating your value, right?
That is correct.
So out of Brooklyn Law School, did you go directly to Rome?
I didn't. So I graduated from law school in 1991, a year in which there were no jobs, right? I mean, nobody was getting a job. In my third year of law school, I was married already. We were broke. And so I went to the career placement office and got referred for a clerk job. And so I worked at a law firm 25 hours a week in my third year of law school. That was Olshan, Grunman, Fromm, and Rosenzweig. When I got done taking the bar, I called up the head of the legal department and the litigation department, and I said, okay, I'm done with the bar. And she said, okay, why don't you show up on Monday and we'll see if we can find something for you to do. I was hoping actually to have a little bit of a break between the bar exam and my starting a new job, but alas, I was not going to say no. And I worked there really doing corporate and bankruptcy type litigation. And it wasn't until one of the associates that were doing matrimonials went on maternity leave that I was asked to fill in for her when she was gone. I was very unhappy about this prospect. I had not even taken family law in law school. Like, this was not something that I was planning on doing. I filled in, and again, lo and behold, a little surprise in life, I actually found it really gratifying, right? It was not just about a corporation and how much money it was saving or making. It was about helping someone in their everyday life. And that was enormously satisfying to me.
That's great. So how long were you at that firm practicing? So how did you stay in the matrimonial area until the associate came back, or were you able to?
Oh, yeah, yes. And then the whole complexion of that litigation department was changing. And so I sort of landed with a solo practitioner who had just left big law. My superiors at the old Shank-Grundman firm made sure I had a soft landing. And I worked there for approximately 2 years, just doing matrimonial work. And one of the lawyers who we shared a space with came into my office one day, and he says to me, I don't know what you're doing here. This part is without the expletives that he used. I don't know what you're doing here. I see in the law journal that Stan Lotwin over at Tensor Greenblatt is looking for an associate. Why don't you apply? And I said, oh, sure. Stan Lotwin, divorce lawyer to the stars, is going to be interested in talking to me. Right. So he said, no. I'm good friends with his right-hand person. I'm going to call and you're going to get the interview. So I go on this interview, and as legend has it, they had already offered the job to somebody else. But when I came in for the interview, they all said to me, like, you better see this one. And then sadly for the person who had already received the offer, that offer was rescinded, and instead the offer was given to me. And that was when I started at what was then Tensor Greenblatt, and that firm later became Blank Rome. And so that was in 1995.
Wow. So that was a fortunate for you, or you must have just blown their socks off with your interview skills and your abilities. So kudos to you, right?
Thank you.
So you spent almost over 20 years at Blank Rome. How did that experience shape sort of how you practice law and how you practice matrimonial law, would you say?
So I think that any litigation that is deadline driven and client service driven is, of course, something that is very challenging. I had a baby in July of 1997, and managing, getting home at 8 p.m. when I hadn't seen my son all day, like, that was really wearing on me. And so I went in and saw one of the senior partners, and I said, look, I can't keep doing this. You either have to work out a deal with me where I'm going to have some reduced hours arrangement and you'll pay me less, or I have to land someplace else because I can't have my child at home not knowing his mother. And so they said to me, we've never, ever in the history of the firm had like a reduced hours attorney, but let's try it for a year. Like, if you can make it work, then, we'll go along with it. And if it's not working out, then you have to make that decision. And so I started doing the reduced hours. So I was supposed to leave at 5 p.m. every day. That didn't always happen. And what transpired is that I was pretty much working full-time hours, but I was doing it on my timetable. And so while I was getting 20% less comp, They were getting more of the same amount of effort, but it just gave me permission for myself, because I think all of us as lawyers were very performance driven. I gave myself permission to take time when I needed to take it in order to be a mom. And I also learned about boundaries, and that also is something that is critical for young lawyers to learn, that there has to be boundaries between work and personal life. You will not survive if you're not very cognizant and firm when it comes to keeping those boundaries. As George Costanza said on Seinfeld, worlds are colliding, worlds cannot collide.
Yeah, and if you don't impose the boundaries yourself, no one's going to
That's right.
put them up for you, right? No one's gonna be like, oh, I shouldn't bother her because, it's 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever time, or you really need to be firm about putting the boundaries in yourself, I think.
And then when it was time, review time came every year, and my deal was, it sort of didn't end until I was ready for it to end. And I was told each year, if only you worked full time, you'd be made partner just like that. Full time. I actually do work full time, right? I actually do. And so they said to me, 65 years of firm policy, we're never going to make you a partner under these arrangements. And so I went out and I got myself a sweet offer from somebody else. And I went in and I said, I got what I wanted from somebody else. I got a $100,000 increase in pay, the hours that I want, and I got the title. So I get the firm policy. It's been nice knowing you. See you later. And they said, but you can't leave. I'm like, oh, I can. I can, and I am. And so, as I say, like presto changeo. So funny how 65 years of firm policy got changed, and they made me a partner. And I said, okay, I'll stay. And I said, but there's one other thing. What's that? I'm going to work from home on Friday. And they had no choice but to agree. And so that worked out just great for me. And then a couple of more years passed. And of course, I was building my reputation in the industry. And I was told, it's too bad you just don't work full time, because we could make you an equity partner just like that. And I said to myself, you're going to make me an equity partner. All right. And it's going to be on my terms.
Yeah.
Now, I get that not everyone has the currency, right? I mean, it's something to draw lines in the sand and say, you're going to do this for me or else. But fortunately, my currency apparently had a lot of value. And so I did become an equity partner without me having to make threats. And then I was made, I was practice group leader. I was on the billing committee, on the partner board. There were all sorts of fabulous things that I had the privilege of doing, but I was also doing that while balancing my practice and also traveling between the offices, which was a challenge. It really was.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned prior to our call that you had 3 kids, so you were able to have 3 kids and all of that. That's a lot. I know.
So my life partner has 2 boys. I have 1 child together. We were together, and we have our crazy bunch of a 27, 26, and 23-year-old. So yeah.
I had 3 kids, so I know it's a challenge. Uh-oh. Did you lose me? Because I lost you for a second.
I'm here. I lost you for a second, but I think it was just because I wasn't moving my mouse.
Okay. Very odd. They can edit that out, hopefully. So, okay, well, that's where were we? You were up to blank Rome, but since then you've now founded your own practice with some colleagues. So what has the transition been like going from big law to more of a boutique firm?
So I thought that it would be more work on the administrative side, but that's not the case. My partner, Jordan, really deals with most of the firm administration. So I actually have the bandwidth to spend more time working on my relationship with my clients and the client cases. Everyone who works for me here or works with me, I knew from a prior life. So my partner, Valentina Shaknes, I hired as a paralegal years ago at Blank Rome. I wrote her a letter of recommendation to go to Brooklyn Law School. She came back to the firm as a second, a 2L for the summer. And then she came as an associate, and she too decided, as she was having children, that it was a challenge. And so she moved on. My partner, Jordan Messeri, his first day at Blank Rome was September 11th, 2001. And so that was a rather interesting first day at work. But I've known Jordan, for 25 years, and my partner Heidi came with me from Blank Rome, and our staff have all been with us in prior lives. And so everyone here, my young partner, Melissa Osei, came from Blank Rome. So it's sort of like old home week. We all know each other, and we have each other's backs in a way that I can't really adequately describe. It's really beautiful.
And does your entire firm practice matrimonial law, or do you have other practice groups as well?
Nope, we only do matrimonial law. So when we have trust and estates matters, I have my go-to people. At tax laws, tax issues, I have my go-to people. And so it actually allows you to market at the same time as you're seeking advice from other people, because the likelihood is that those people are going to send work back to me instead of just calling someone else at a big firm. There is an advantage to just picking up the phone at a big firm and saying, hey, I have this issue, but I've developed my relationship with other people. And so it's actually, it's been great in terms of adding that to my marketing tools, right?
Mm-hmm. I actually appreciate that too. In a small firm, you can work with people that you like and you want to work with, right? Because you get to choose who you're referring your clients to, rather than being stuck with the machinery of a large firm. Sometimes you don't necessarily either like or really want to work with those people. So it is an advantage, I think.
I definitely think, yes.
So, you were saying that you guys only practice matrimonial law. That's fantastic. You must have a real expertise in that area. You were also mentioning that, over the years, you've really built up your reputation. You've built up your clientele. How have you? Well, let me back up a second. Do you feel that it's the relationships that really leads to sort of long-term client success? And if so, how do you work on building those relationships of trust with your clients?
So I 100% think that it's the relationships that matters, right? I mean, I know so much about the intricate details of my clients' lives, right? Sometimes I joke that I know their life better than they know it, because there are certain things that stay with me. And it's just a question of really making an effort to stay in touch with people. I have most of my referrals come from former clients. I mean, and I have had the privilege of representing big law partners and firms where they don't have matrimonial groups. And so I get all of those referrals. I have clients who are, for example, concierge, Park Avenue doctors. Great referral sources, right? Every person that comes in and talks about the stress that they're having, whatever's going on in their life, is referred to me. And so, yes, those relationships are critical. And I do have, I have sort of a Blank Rome alumni group that, we all sort of send business to each other. That's also like a critical part of my my referral base. But yeah, it's all about the relationships. If you don't tend to them, they die. And it is time consuming and it takes effort, but it's worth it.
No, I feel the same way. And something I found challenging about the pandemic was not being able to do a lot of in-person meetings, because I tend to keep up my relationships. That's my favorite way of, tending to that garden, is meeting people, catching up with them over a coffee, a glass of wine, or lunch or something. how did you deal with that situation? How did you maintain relationships during the pandemic?
So I did do like, Zoom and Teams, cocktails, time, time just for me to talk to one person one-on-one. I think that most people were very hungry to have social contact, and that was very well received. But we started KSTM on November 4th, 2019. And fortunately for us, we had all of the files migrated because every single client came with me. We
That's
had the
amazing.
files migrated. We were, had the retainer agreements. We were up and running when COVID came. And so while the courts weren't open, it was obviously slower because and I don't like going to court is not my preference of things. I would far more likely like to negotiate a deal with someone. But sometimes we don't have that luxury and that court is necessary. And so when that is, then we go. But it was just trying to get some forward movement, get some discovery time, right? We can still produce documents. We can still, negotiate. Then we started to do depositions virtually, which was a challenge, right? There's, you have to mark and upload every exhibit before you start the deposition. And so while you can tack on documents, there was that element of surprise that, that was sort of missing once we started doing that. And we actually did some trials that way too. I'm so happy that we're shifting back to in person. I have a case on tomorrow, the last court appearance. I said, you know what? We want to come in person, Judge. And she's like, all right. And it was a totally different experience. I could stand in the hallway with my adversary and talk about a stipulation that we needed to get done. And so we got a lot accomplished, like for example, in that court appearance. But then the flip side to that is all the time that sometimes is wasted while you're sitting around in the hallway, and obviously it's costing your clients more money because we're waiting for our case to be called. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, but I'm delighted that in person is coming back. I think it's fantastic. And I get to spend more time with my clients. When we are sitting in the hallway waiting for the case to be called, we talk about their lives, what's matter, what's important to them. And there's a lot to be said from those conversations.
Yeah, I think sometimes you don't realize you're building a relationship just when you're having chit chat, and
right.
There was no chit chat when everything's via Zoom or very
Correct.
limited. So we're talking about the pandemic still a little bit. Are you seeing more divorces and family law issues since the pandemic has sort of lifted?
So the only thing that I've seen a real uptick in is prenuptial agreements. And I think that's still a side effect from that whole length of time where there were no weddings, right? So we've had this, massive uptick in weddings. And, I'll be doing 5 prenups at a time. And sometimes on very, short turnaround times. So that's stressful because, prenups are, if you don't do it the right way and in a calm, orderly fashion, people tend to make mistakes. And when I'm not going to be around in 20 years to talk about what that agreement, what we thought it said, we need to actually say what we wanted to say, and that can't be done, on speed dial. So that's where I see it. I mean, in general, I feel like my line of work is recession proof. When times are bad, people are fighting about money. When times are good, people are fighting about money. So I don't really, I don't see ebb and flow.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I do commercial litigation, so we tend to stay pretty busy no matter what the economy. In fact, sometimes get busier as the economy starts to decline. So that's kind of interesting. What about post-nuptial agreements? Have you seen more of those recently than before?
So in general, I don't find there to be, I don't do a ton of post-nuptial agreements. The circumstances of doing those are typically someone's acted badly, right? So someone's cheated, someone has some addiction issues. Maybe they drink too much, maybe they're smoking weed, maybe they're doing other things. And a spouse says, listen, like, I'm willing to give this more time, but I'm not going to do it unless I know that I'm protected financially. And so if you want me to stay in this relationship and give you another try, there's some stuff that I want. The difficulty with post-nups is you need, like all contracts, you need consideration, right? Prenups, just the act of marrying is the consideration for a prenup. For a post-nup, you just can't, say, oh, we're going to change this around. You really have to sort of put some window dressing on it. And your relationship when you're a fiance is not the same as when you're a spouse, right? So there is a confidential relationship that has a fiduciary component to it when you're a spouse. And so it's a little bit of a different animal. But I don't do a lot of them in general. To my mind, if we're sitting down and we're negotiating all this stuff, isn't it really a separation agreement? Like, why are we pretending? And then I've had people who come to me and say, I really want to save my marriage. My spouse wants out. And the only way that he'll stay in, and this happened very recently, is if I enter into a post-nup. And I'm like, let me see if I understand this. You're desperate to save your marriage. The only reason he won't divorce you now is because you'll agree to some great terms, which great terms for him equals really bad terms for you.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Like, it's pretty clear to me that this is about, using your desire to stay in this marriage as a bargaining chip to get a good deal. Please don't do it. Please don't.
Yeah. I mean, if one person wants out, there's really little reason to stay, right?
So, New York hasn't had no fault for that long a period of time. We were one of the last states in the country to adopt irretrievable breakdown as a grounds for divorce. And it's hard for people to get their mind around if their spouse just wants out. But I was a good wife. I was a good provider. Shouldn't it be harder to get divorced than just saying things aren't working out? It's like, well, I see that perspective, but then for years, and ironically, it was the Women's Bar Association that opposed no fault for as long as we didn't have it. Were the sad stories and it was typically women who would come to me saying, I'm in a dead marriage. I'm absolutely miserable. And I would say, how long have you been married? I've been married for 25, 30 years. There's no adultery? No. Trying to set forth a cruelty cause of action in a complaint that would meet the standard required for long-term marriages, it was sometimes difficult. And I'd see women who were just literally trapped in dead marriages, who were beside themselves. And so I think you're much better off. The marriage isn't working for one of you. It's not working for one of you, then you really need to let it go.
That's interesting. I mean, I've definitely talked to some other divorce attorneys that I've met through work, and some of them take a very negative view towards divorce, even though they're divorce attorneys, which I always find fascinating, just because of the process of it. But
right. So what are we doing for children, right? So
exactly.
Is there a presumption that staying in a dead marriage is good for children?
Yeah,
I personally think that kids have very big eyes and very big ears. They know way more than we give them credit for. And then there's also the notion of, like, what am I teaching my children? Like, am I modeling the right way? Is this what I want my son or my daughter to think that a healthy, happy marriage is?
Yeah.
And then there's fighting, right? I mean, like, there's fighting and it's like, it's not good for them.
Exactly. You want them to be in a happy home.
Yes.
And sometimes that's not a marital home, right?
Correct.
So we touched on this a bit, how matrimonial law has changed over the years since you've been practicing. Other than the change to no fault, which has obviously been huge, are there other changes that you've seen in the practice of law in New York area?
I think in general, and and this isn't just matrimonial law necessarily. I think that there has been, when I think about when I first started 33 years ago, I saw the practice of law as a much more genteel, respectful, honorable profession. We gave professional courtesies to our opposing counsel. We didn't scream, we didn't shriek. We had an approach of advocacy that's done in a classy way, right? We don't have to be brutes, we don't have to lie, we don't have to scream. And I feel like lawyers, and that's sort of reflecting in society in general, I just feel as though the bar has come way down when it comes to acceptable behavior, and I'm sort of sad about that. And I also think that, what young lawyers don't really understand when they go to law school is that first and foremost, lawyers, it's the legal profession is a business, right? And it's a lot about money. And so while some people have the benefit of having the wherewithal to be able to do the right work on a pro bono basis, or to take a public service job that gives them a great deal of satisfaction. For most people who don't have that, that comfort, it's about money. It's about, networking, building your practice, billing your time, and collecting, right? And so I think that's something that has changed over time. I think back in the day when you went to a big white shoe firm out of law school, the likelihood was that you'd be there until you retired at the age of 70, right? And even if you didn't have a big book of business, you were an important part of that firm community. And I think that's completely changed. That is just not the way it is anymore.
No, I agree. That's completely gone. And I think that's caused a lot of the issues that you touched upon at the beginning of the answer, right? People are less genteel, they're less professional because they don't have that security, and they don't feel like they feel like everyone, they always need to be fighting, for the scraps, basically. So it is sad, and not what it should be, right? We should get to be able to practice in a way that we can advocate for our clients, but not be rude to each other and not be, bullies to each other. There's really no need for it. The law is what the law is. The facts are what the facts are. The judge is going to say what the judge is going to say. There's no reason to all the animosity that sometimes builds up when you're in litigation.
And in my particular practice area, what I say to people when they say to me, this affidavit is full of lies, just the whole thing is a lie, 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 lie. Why would my spouse lie? And I say, well, sometimes people lie, but sometimes it's about perspective, right? So you and I can watch the same event unfold, and because of our life experience, we might take in what happened in very different ways. And when I retell my sense of what happened, it could be totally different than yours. And that doesn't mean that I'm lying or you're lying. It means that we perceived it differently. And I sometimes think that people don't appreciate that either. I mean, that's sort of, we talk a lot about perception. We talk about like diversity and the benefits of having people at a table that look different from one another and have different life experiences, because that's the flavor that you bring. And so, but my practice area is, everyone's accusing everyone of being a liar, and they may be lying. They may just have perceived it differently.
It's good that you can be a calming influence if possible on that. But I have the same in my practice area. There's often individuals at the heart of every litigation, even if it's a big commercial case. And individuals.
And it's our job, isn't it, to find out, like, so what is your goal, right? What do you want to leave this case having achieved? And if I can, and that's also part of negotiating, right? Like, what's the most important thing to the other side? And can I come up with a way to get that person the thing that they want most? And maybe they're able to tolerate a whole bunch of other things that are not so pleasant, but they're getting what they want. I just think that people don't, that there's an absence of listening, right? Everyone's busy talking. People don't listen enough. And I think that's also part of the problem.
Yeah, no, and that's key. And sometimes, a client will come to you and they don't know necessarily what they want. They just know what they want to get at the end, like where they want to be. Um, but they're not sure what they're asking you to do. And so it's your job as the attorney to really help them get to there. And sometimes it doesn't require what they thought it was going to require, and sometimes it does, but sometimes might be an easier path. And if you can get them there on the easier path, then that is what you should be doing as the attorney, and not going to the harder path, even if that means that will be the path that brings you more billable hours or a higher fee. You have to really, your job is to get them there as efficiently as possible.
And that's what I think is part of what's so important about building a practice that flourishes, right? I want people to send clients to me because Caroline is going to do what's best for you. And that often entails having conversations which are very unpleasant, right? People don't like, sometimes I say, I'm just bad news Betty. But I have an obligation to tell you the reality of the situation, what's achievable, what's not achievable. Stop behaving this way because it's going to hurt you. Those are the hard conversations, but those are the conversations that lawyers should be having with their clients. Because I say to them, listen, if I told you what you wanted to hear throughout the entire case, and then at the end you had a terrible result, and you turn to me and say, why didn't you tell me? That is never happening in a relationship that I have with a client. You're going to know. I'm going to tell you once. I'm going to tell you twice. I'm probably going to tell you 3 times. Oh yeah, I'm going to tell you in writing too.
Definitely.
But that's a big part of our job as counselors of law, right? So yes, we are lawyers. We practice law, but we're also counselors. And how do we help them and help people's kids too, right? I mean, because we shouldn't be mercenary for a client when the kids are going to be in a sort of the nuclear fallout.
Yeah, no, that's a whole different ball game that you're dealing with than we have in our practice. But having the third party, the children, does require even an extra level of care, I think, in how you're counseling the client. But it's essential, and I think not enough attorneys practice law that way. Though they forget that they're supposed to be counselors. They kind of leave that part out, and I think that's something that is really, it's a sign of a good lawyer, right? If you're doing your job right, you should be doing that. But a lot of people, they leave that out.
100%.
I don't think they necessarily teach that to you in big law either. I think it's something you have to either you develop it because of your relationships with your clients, but it's not something that's necessarily driven into you if you're just supposed to be putting your nose down to the grind and churning out legal work, right? It's something that you have to develop as a skill.
That sort of gets at the problem with the whole billable hour, right? So yeah. The billable hour, is the almighty thing. That's how we make our money. And I think that as young lawyers, especially at big firms, you are whipped into bill. And that's, it's sort of a problem. But I just haven't figured out the other dynamic, because especially what I do for a living, I can't say how much and how long something's going to take, because these cases have lifespans and they change. But I think that it is very important also for young people to have mentors. Someone has to teach you this stuff, and that has been missing in COVID.
Yeah, I'm sure it's because you don't have the in-person experience, and it's really hard to mentor someone virtually if they can't see what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and how you're having those conversations with clients. So no, it's something we need to get back to, I hope. And I know we're running short on time, but I do want to ask you, we have 3 sort of rapid fire questions that I like to ask everyone at the end of the interview. I always find these answers to be fascinating. So if you couldn't be an attorney, what career would you choose?
Right now, I'd probably be a therapist.
Therapist. That's great. So it's very similar to the counseling type
That's right.
work that we've been talking about. What is the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you graduated from law school?
That the business of law would be such a, a an important driver of how one practices, right? We graduated from law school and we have this vision of, our altruistic selves. We're going to go out there, we're going to do great work. And no one told us, oh, by the way, you better work on your marketing. You better figure out how you're going to get your book of business, because you can be the greatest worker bee ever. And when they're done with you, they're going to spit you out. And if you don't have a book of business, then too bad for you.
I second that, definitely. And would you recommend a law career to women considering law school today?
I actually don't.
Okay. How come?
I think that it's an incredibly hard profession for women, because no matter what anyone says, we have two full-time jobs, right? We have the full-time job of taking care of our family, and we have the full-time job of running our practice and doing our, tending to our career. I just think it's a very demanding, stressful lifestyle. And when you think about all the people who graduate from law school, right? I always say, like, what happens to the people in the bottom 50% of law school classes? I have no idea, right? It's like, you're not getting the big high paying jobs because you weren't at the top school, you weren't graduating at the top of your class. And so you may have a ton of student debt, right? Because law school is really expensive. And when you think about how much debt you're taking on versus how much you're making if you're not at a big firm, or you don't have your own firm. And so that was the other thing that, was great about leaving big law, is that I actually make more money being in my own business, because I don't have to support this giant structure, right? But it took me 30 years to get there. And it's a struggle, and it's a struggle every single day. Technology has allowed us not to have to be in the office all the time, which is great. The technology has robbed us the downtime, right? I mean, I'm not in the office. I'm not on call 24/7. It's a trade-off, right? And it's not something that, it's great that I've been able to achieve all of this in my career after 33 years, but it's hard. It's really hard.
It's hard. It's still hard. I hear you. I've been doing it over 20. It's still hard every day.
Hard every day.
Well, thank you so much, Caroline. This has been such a pleasure speaking to you, getting to know you, and learning all about your career and where you are now. And I can't wait to keep following you and see where you go from here, and excited about your new firm. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Success in Brief with your host, Rosanne Felicello. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others. You can catch prior episodes at www.felicellolaw.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Twitter, and more.